The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Xavier Espot Zamora, Head of the Government of the Principality of Andorra. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Señor President,
Mr. President, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by extending my congratulations to His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang on his election as President of the 79th General Assembly. I would like to thank you, President, for having chosen unity in diversity, sustainable development and human dignity everywhere for everyone as the theme. Andorra could not be any more in agreement than we are with this goal, which we fully support, because my country is tangible, real proof that people are able to live together peacefully for more than 800 years. Indeed, thanks to our understanding and mutual respect shown by our inhabitants, our country has never had a war and we've never had an army. Andorra has always been an oasis of peace, tolerance and cohabitation, including during the most troubled times of the old continent. I'd also particularly like to thank the Secretary-General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his perseverance, for always preferring the path of conciliation, and for his message in favor of international law and against climate change. I would also like to stress the impetus that the Secretary-General has given to the Summit of the Future, which gave rise to the Pact for the Future that my country has signed. The goal of this is to strengthen the multilateral system, to adopt concrete measures to address new challenges and establish a roadmap to address existential risks to humanity, civilization, and most people on Earth. Classical authors, they are the basis of Western culture. They tell us, and I use the present tense because they never die, they say that all speech is vain and empty unless it be accompanied by action. What is important are the things that we do throughout our lives. All civilizations are born in specific circumstances, and very often they go down in history thanks to their conquests. But what is the conquest of this civilization? What is its vocation? And what is the heritage that it will leave behind? Or rather, what is the conquest, vocation and heritage that we want this civilization to leave to future generations? Ladies and gentlemen, today in the West we very often forget that democracy goes over and above simply putting your ballot in the box every 4 or 5 years. The very substance of the concept of democracy is the values involved: dignity, tolerance, equality, freedom, respect for people and nations. These values are human rights, the rights that this General Assembly has decided to protect 76 years ago by adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It would seem that the spirit in which this declaration was forged, a symbol of peace and dignity following 2 devastating world wars, is fading little by little. The forward march of extremist political positions is a reaction in the light of something that is viewed as a threat, an order that's viewed as a threat. The feeling that a recent past has been lost and it's better than the present, that has invaded current generations, and heightened by the idea that climate change will worsen living conditions and that globalization and migration flows will dilute and depersonalize our societies, and that children and young people today will live less well than their parents did. We find ourselves at a key moment in history where the debate cannot be hidden behind rhetorical language to avoid this situation. We will soon be celebrating the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, and this organization must continue to be the cornerstone of our world, to be an organization where states and the nations that make it up are moving in the same direction with the same goal: to respond effectively to the great challenges of our times in order to leave future generations a heritage which promises hope. Ladies and gentlemen, We have never had so many tools to bring about cooperation and dialogue. In the light of a very complex reality, but convinced as we are of the equality between nations, we must ensure the implementation of the Charter of the United Nations, strengthened by the pillars of the defense of human rights as well as the defense of international humanitarian law. Those are the things, and those alone, that must govern relations between states. The serious situations in Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon and Sudan, and other regions where we see conflicts that have become permanent, particularly in the region of the Sahel, we cannot remain indifferent to these. We must urgently become mobilized to achieve the most noble goal of politics, peace. We must come together and find solutions to conflicts without violence or recourse to military resources. We would call upon all parties to work for peace, and that they respect international humanitarian law and that they obey it. Because nothing can justify the attacks suffered by civilian populations, nothing can justify the attacks against hospitals and schools, and nothing can justify using hunger as a strategy of war. Nothing can justify such irrational behavior. Children are the main victims of this. Children and young people take pride of place in on the international agenda of Andorra, because we firmly believe that they are the present and the future of humanity, which means that all actions to benefit them become strategic actions for the development of a country, of any country. This is why, since its creation, we have supported the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary-General for Children and Armed Conflict, and more recently the study on the impact of climate change on children and armed conflict. When I asked you at the beginning of my statement what conquest, what vocation and what heritage did we want to leave behind, there can be no doubt a world in peace for our children and our young people, a world that provides opportunities to each and every one of them. This is the great responsibility which we bear, to ensure that future generations do not have a life worse than ours, but rather that they are fully able to participate in progress, as we have agreed in recent days in the Summit of the Future. Excellencies, Andorra joined the United Nations in 1993. The international context at the time was full of hope, the reunification of Europe after the Cold War. We decided to become a member of the United Nations with the conviction that we wanted to be a society open to the world, which shares with the international community its opportunities and its challenges. We believe that the problems of the world are also our problems, and it is for that reason that we wanted and want to participate in solving them. 3 decades have gone by since then, and although we see the Cold War re-emerging, and whilst in the Middle East we see increasing tensions, and whilst extremism is advancing and is of concern, Andorra fully believes in its international commitments and multilateralism. We believe that these are the best and the only instruments to resolve the current crisis. But Andorra also attaches particular importance to regional cooperation, particularly that deployed by the European Union, with which Andorra is negotiating an association agreement, which will mean that we will be able progressively and in a structured way to enter the European single market, to diversify our economy and participate in building a geographic, economic and political reality, that of the European Union, with a privileged status of associated state. Whether it be obligations that we undertake when joining an international organization or by signing an international treaty, Andorra acts to fully respect its commitments. And as small as my country might appear to major states, that in no way takes away from our ambitious objectives. And this is always essential, as is our multilateralism, the climate emergency, gender equality, the digital transition and cultural diversity. On that last point, Andorra is very proud to have co-facilitated for one further year the resolution on multilingualism at the United Nations together with Guatemala. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is undoubtedly a global threat, but it's also true that it affects certain countries more than others. This is the case for coastal regions where the sea level is increasing and mountainous regions where the ecosystem has become more vulnerable. This is the case for Andorra. The effects of climate change risk changing the way of life of its inhabitants and even the economy of the country. And it's for this reason that we have made the fight against climate change one of our main goals, internationally as well as nationally. Since the ratification of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 2011, Andorra has met its communication obligations by respecting the principles of transparency, coherence, comparability, exhaustivity, and accuracy, and we have even implemented certain things ahead of time with regard to the convention. In 2015, Andorra was one of the first to join the Framework Convention and produce our NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution. And we updated it in 2020 and 2022, and we plan to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. In 2023, Andorra was the first state to present its biannual report on transparency, which showed once again the importance that we attach to our commitment to fight against climate change. Nationally, we have also undertaken great efforts to implement a new energy policy to progressively increase the national production of renewable energy and replace heat production systems with less polluting systems. This policy in favor of renewable energy was led by the public sector with the implementation of very ambitious legislation and using significant aid and action plans. However, do you know that all of these efforts will be in vain if other countries do not do the same thing, if we are not all moving in the same direction, because fighting climate change is the most urgent global challenge that we have. The broadest challenge which requires the highest possible level of cooperation, collaboration, generosity and respect. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the midway point in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda, and we are going to soon be in the final home stretch. What has been achieved is already deceiving, bearing in mind that behind the results are millions of people who are suffering the consequences. The Sustainable Development Goals are certainly very ambitious, but if we decide to implement them with persistence, creativity and innovation, then we can bring about real change by taking as a principle inclusion and making gender equality a reality, sustainability a norm, the protection of children an inviolable principle, and by ensuring that divides are overcome once and for all. The poet and novelist of France, Louis Aragon, wrote that the future of men is women. That was in 1963, on the eve of full equality between men and women, a genuine declaration of love and admiration for his wife, his muse. In certain parts of the world, we still have a lot to do in order to understand that it's in our interest that women have the same chances to learn and develop their talents and to work and to earn their living as do men. In Andorra, equality, non-discrimination and inclusion are cross-cutting elements of public policy. We have adopted legislative measures in this regard in order to respect our commitments and to fully achieve these goals. That is a logical consequence in a society where women play a very active part in public affairs. But over and above public policy, the key element of social transformation is education. Equal education does not just mean teaching girls and boys to mutually respect each other. It means giving them the tools necessary to question social norms which perpetuate inequalities and to enable them to build a society where every individual is able to develop themselves to their full potential, whatever their gender. Currently, parity is respected in our institutions in decision-making positions, and for the first time we've had the honor to have an Andorran expert on the United Nations Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. but bringing about gender equality requires determination and perseverance on the part of each and every one of us. As representatives of our respective countries, we have the moral and political obligation to promote this transformation. We must become committed to ensure that gender equality is not just a long-term aspiration, but a concrete reality in our societies. That is the only solution that will guarantee a better future for future generations. Excellencies, access to information is in the process of redefining the paradigms of growth and economic and social development. As public services and the private sector are being converted to the digital world, the divide that separates those that have access to this world and those don't is becoming ever more pernicious. The Global Digital Compact that we adopted during the Summit for the Future includes actions in favor of digital literary actions in order to guarantee an inclusive, open, safe and protected digital future. In this area, multilateralism has a crucial role to play to create opportunities, and at the same time it must guarantee accessibility and security in this new virtual space of globalization. For small states such as Andorra, these technologies have the potential to provide resources with exponential added value. Aware as we are of the situation and our manifest need to diversify our economy, Andorra has made huge strides in this area. Currently, 6% of Andorran homes have an internet connection. The country has implemented a national strategy for digital transition, which is particularly focused on digital rights of citizens and respect for Sustainable Development Goals 9, 16 and 17, with the creation of an ethical and legal framework that preserves digital rights, protecting private life and data security, and ensuring free access to digital information, because we want all citizens to be able to access the digital world and thus avoid situations of inequality. Ladies and gentlemen, the Principality of Andorra has made a commitment to this organization of peoples and for peoples 30 years ago, in the hope that a better world would be possible, because our country, small size, can also make exemplary choices. We presented ourselves to the world as an ancestral land which finally has found its place in the community of nations, a country that is open to the world, with a constructive spirit and a peaceful disposition open to dialogue, in favor of comprehension and harmony between peoples. These are the values that continue to guide us nationally and internationally. It is important that all peoples promote a new culture of peace based on an end to war and on a commitment to bring about peace agreements to resolve conflicts. Development must reach all four corners of the planet, where fundamental rights must be respected, and it is essential that this new digital universe be based on knowledge. I began my intervention by quoting the classical authors. If I may, I'd like to end in the same way. There's a work that is at the heart of Greek literature that has left its mark on Western culture and which is very difficult to forget. It refers to conquest and destruction, hatred, compassion, love and death. Homer's Iliad is in a certain way a mirror of the human condition. Even though this work shows that life is not always fair and that it is subject to the will of the gods, it also shows us that human relations can, if we want them to be, profoundly humane. And I think that we must take ownership of this message. It is important to believe in humanity and to work to build, all of us together, peace in the world, as well as a world of solidarity that is more just and more inclusive. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Head of Government of the Principality of Andorra.